the rest. All right, post webinar questions. Can I put cooked food scraps into the compost that I take to my local bin? I'm assuming they're talking about things like innermost gardens, which have compost, and I think they have some rules around that, as I'm sure all of the different compost collective bins do. So, yeah, Kate, you'd probably be a good one to start.
With that community. Oh, sorry.
Go, Kate.
Sorry. Yeah, I'd check with your local community compost that you're taking it to, because everyone does have their own way they like to do it. I wouldn't want to recommend, like, at Kaicycle we have certain things that we ask people not to put in, but it might be different for others, so just check in with them. I'm sure they'd be happy to advise you. Right. But, like, for example, we accept cooked food scraps, no problem. We just ask people to not put in meat or too much dairy or raw eggs.
Great. And this was actually answered at the very beginning, but let's answer it again. What are the absolute no-nos in terms of food waste that should not go into the compost? One of the things I always get asked is about pasta as well.
Pasta?
Cooked pasta. We often get asked that in our rat-proof composting workshops.
I mean, anything that will break down can go in the compost. Like, I did have one person who, what did he put in something really, like, he put in plastic wrapping, and I said, oh, you can't do that. Like, I can't. And he's like, so that won't compost. He's like, no love, that won't compost. So I guess anything that will break down that is organic can go in your compost, and then you just adjust according to size and risk of, I guess, pests getting into the bin. Yeah.
I would just say also think about balance. Don't put too much of one thing in there. And diversity. So I'm fine with cooked foods in my compost bin in my commercial and at home. But one thing that I don't like a lot of is in my commercial composting, our business customers sometimes give us dough slop. And that's a really challenging thing to compost, and also raw potatoes as well. What has to happen is those potatoes need to cook before they then start to break down, and same with the dough slop. It also needs to cook into bread before it can then break down. So it's not that you can't put it in, but it just may take a bit longer, and it may need to be mixed with more carbon products to allow that air to circulate around to keep things active in there.
And a question about how to manage flies in the kitchen bin and those pesky, weird, little tiny flying bugs. I know all about those, and I've got a great technique for catching them. Yeah, how do you manage flies in the kitchen? I feel like
I spray Bokashi EM. I spray EM into my bin, even though I'm not theoretically doing an anaerobic Bokashi thing. I've got EM spray in my kitchen that I also spray down my toilet and my kitchen sink, and I spray EM into my kitchen bucket if it's getting too smelly or the flies are in there. I also have a lid on my compost bucket in my kitchen if there's a fly problem. And the other thing is just to empty it regularly so it's not building up with food in your kitchen.
The more love you give your compost and the more attention you give it, the less stinky and fly it will be to deal with, for sure. In my house, I just have like a layer of browns. I have a sack of browns next to the compost bin, so whenever I put in any fresh stuff, I top it off with a layer of browns, and then I have a coffee sack that I also put on top of that, and that's just awesome. I never get flies. Summer, you'll always get a few flies, but on the whole, it's really good.
And I guess it's those regular visits to the bin helps to reduce any pest issue, flies, rats, anything. Like the more time you spend, we just use little yogurt containers, or not yogurt, ice cream containers. So that means that it's kind of going out like twice a day, and that's constant checking and like poking around, making sure that no one's interested in covering for flies if we need to. So it's kind of a regular trips to the bin, talking to it, making sure everyone's going okay, normal composting things.
Nice. My trick for catching those little, what I like to call fruit flies, is you just fill up an empty beer bottle. We ironically use a Corona bottle with a little bit of apple cider vinegar and a little bit of dishwashing liquid, and they just flock to it and they fall in and they can't get out.
Good idea. Good tip.
It works really well. Like ours is just chock-a-block, and we don't have any more fruit flies flying around the kitchen. Nice. Great. All right. I found 2 avocado pips that have shooted in my compost bin. Should I try and grow them outside my bin, or should I bin them? I'm not expecting them to ever fruit, but I thought I could transplant them for shading in another house.
They're beautiful plants. Like if you can grow them, they're definitely nice. Yeah, they're not going to fruit, but be a fun growing experiment. Otherwise, just chuck them back in the compost. Avocado stones take ages to break down, even in a hot compost.
Yeah, and they'll just sprout like crazy. They'll just be constantly sprouting. But yeah, I've done a couple, and we just kind of plant them in places that I want some shade, like that person wants to do. They're really pretty. I really like their leaves. Never expecting fruit, but that's okay.
Yeah, avocado trees are a bit frost tender, so if you live in a place where it's frosty, then the seedlings can get killed out with the frost. Avocados also really like fertile, free draining soil. So here on Waiheke, we have heavy clay soils, and it's very difficult for us to grow avocados here. Even if it might germinate in your compost bin, it doesn't necessarily mean if you plant it out, you're going to have a happy tree grow out of that. And you might get fruit. If it does turn into a happy tree, you might get fruit if you're patient enough, and you can wait 10 or 15 years.
Awesome. Right, I'm actually, that's the end of the questions, but before we go, I'd love to ask your kind of top tip to get started with composting, or what's your kind of top tip about composting? I'm going to start with you, Kate.
Cool. I think just get excited about the idea of it. I mean, there's a lot of and take it slow. Like, don't get overwhelmed because there's so much to keep in mind all at once. Like, you'll just learn more as you go. It's just, as you say, as Prashanti said, like, it starts with like streaming your food waste in your kitchen into a bin, and then figuring out a way to deal with it. Just get started somewhere, and then you'll just learn more. And it's rewarding. It's super rewarding when you get your first batch of compost and you get that nice stuff you can put on your plants. And I think, just like congratulate yourself for taking some steps to. Can I just launch into a little bit about why I think composting is important?
Sure.
Cool, thanks. So composting is such an important part of nutrient cycling. So we take nutrients out of the ground to grow our food, we eat that food, then currently what we're doing is we're sending food to landfill, and that's just kind of locking those nutrients away, and that creates pollution from the landfill. It also means we're having to use synthetic fertilizers to grow our food in the first place, which also creates pollution, degrades soil, waterway pollution. It's not oils. So if you are just taking those steps to compost, you're enabling those natural nutrient cycles to happen. So you're solving two pollution problems at once, and you're also helping build food security into our soils. So I think just feel empowered and excited about that, taking those steps to take some action on environmental issues in your backyard.
Awesome, thanks, Kate. Jess, how about a final thought from you about composting?
That was so well said, Kate. It does. I think it does get really exciting once you kind of get going. Like, there's nothing more delightful than when you go into your bin and you're starting to see the first worms start to appear because the bin's starting to break down properly, and I think that's amazing. And the smell of finished compost is the best. There's no better smell. I think my tip is to start small and keep it simple. When it gets too complicated or just there's too much to think about, that's when it gets overwhelming. So starting maybe just with a worm bin and kind of getting a hang of that. And then if you're like, I have more space to make a larger bin, then go from there. But often for households, you can't really fill a household compost bin quickly enough to actually get that kind of hotter compost going. So starting small with a worm bin, or joining with others and maybe doing like a small scale community composting where you can actually get enough of those food scraps to make a decent bin and see that compost start to happen. And YouTube is your friend. You can find anything on YouTube. Like, if you're running into problems, there is someone on YouTube who has figured it out and will explain it beautifully.
Awesome, great advice. And last but definitely not least, you, Prashanti.
Thanks. I guess my advice would just be don't give up. Stay committed to keeping your food waste out of the general waste stream. Know that sending food waste to landfill is a big problem, and be committed to not participating in that. And don't give up. If you think you failed, you really haven't failed. Just be patient, and Mother Nature will keep doing what she does the best, which is turning, you know, that's nutrient cycling, going around and around. And certainly we can help through all the tips and tricks we said today. If we're committed and we don't give up, we'll get there in the end.
Awesome. Yep, let's stop. I think it's 157,389 tons of food going into landfill every year. Let's turn that into black gold for our own gardens and community gardens. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.